Friends, we have a very distinguished scholar from the academia, Professor Punjab Singh. He is the Vice Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University. And he has a PhD in water management, which he took in 1969 from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, in collaboration with the University of California, Davis. And before his position as the Vice Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University, he started his career as assistant professor, and then he rose to the position of Secretary, Department of Agricultural Research and Education, GOI, and Director General, Indian Council of Agricultural Research. He has held many responsible positions such as agronomist, head of the division, Assistant Director General, ICAR, Director, Indian Grassland and Fodder Research Institute, and he was the Joint Director and Vice Chancellor of Indian Agricultural Research Institute, then Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru Agricultural University, Jabalpur. He has also served as Regional Plant Production and Protection Officer in the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations in Bangkok. He is elected fellow of many scientific societies and many awards which has been conferred upon him. He has made significant scientific contribution in the fields of water management and crop production and management systems, besides providing leadership in shaping up of national and state level research institutions and agricultural universities. Some of the distinguished awards which he has received: National Productivity Council Award, Millennium Plaque of Honor by Indian Science Congress, World Food Day Award, K.N. Burl Memorial Gold Medal, ISA Gold Medal, Lifetime Achievement Award of Indian Society of Agronomy. He has many research papers, and he has also guided many PhD and MPhil programs. This afternoon, he will speak on excellence and its relevance in academic institutions. Professor Punjab Singh.
Thank you, Sangeeta, and good afternoon to all of you. Well, it's a rare privilege to be here in this institute, particularly NIAS, Indian Institute of Science. I am becoming as a member of the council, another also, but here today because the reason why I am here because Dr. Kasturi Rangan, one of the leading scientists who gave direction to science in general, particularly the space science, asked me to be here to share, and learn something from all of you, because all of you are senior executive in different areas and capacities. So we thought it was good to talk to you for some time and have some kind of interaction and learn. And maybe that I improve myself and become a better governor from tomorrow onward. BHU is a system governing Banaras Hindu University. System itself is an experience for one who gathers. So I think that is how I thought that will be good to accept it. And then this kind of mixed audience, which really represents, as I said, the varied kind of, heavily what we call the biodiversity in that term. I was looking from the military, from bureaucracy, from science, from other areas that you have, and I think that will give a very good chance for me also to at least have some thought on the issues that we are going to think in that kind of sense that you have. Excellence in governance, I will come because the topic is a little different than what you see, but that has been directly linked to what I am going to say. By and large, as we commonly feel, governance in countries generally poor, or else we perhaps should have ruled the world. The kind of intelligentsia, the kind of models, the kind of intellectuals we have, but for certain things we say that we are not able to achieve what we should have achieved. And that is why this becomes very important to share some of these from all of you and see how we can bring that model in practice, multiply that. That is the crux of the whole thing. Many things that I'll be talking, you will always feel that, well, this is all known and nothing can be talked, is not known. But then we have to see how to practice that model, maybe that we interact in the question that we have. And then there are numerous examples also. In any area you talk, I come from agriculture, we have excelled the world. In that sense, if you see, from a begging bowl to a country surplus in food production, today production is not the issue. Today distribution and price and everything are issues, not that we don't have food. How take food to people, how make it available to them. Access to food is more problem than production of food per se. Take space, take this city. Bangalore has really improved the governance for the rest of the world in information technology and kind of thing that we have. And I can keep on quoting. So that is why I said it's nothing that we don't know. We don't know it, but then the question is how to multiply that. Why I selected this particular topic? Because we also say that knowledge will rule the world. Those who have knowledge, and then the basis that we took that science and technology is the base for providing knowledge. We are able to generate knowledge, accept knowledge, multiply that and translate that in action. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt that they will rule the world. And that is why science and technology being the base for generating knowledge in any area. Science doesn't have any boundary. Any subject, any area, any thing you talk of, and you say. So therefore I thought that it will be better that we talk on the science, technology, knowledge, and link this to the governance. And therefore I thought of excellence in science, and then how relevant it is to the academic institution that we are dealing today, which are whatever number, whatever be the capacity. Now then how to link this leadership, we should be able to do that. As far as leadership is concerned, there is nothing that is to be talked. You are all aware of it. Leadership is not that something which is you are born with. Leadership is something you make. You make leaders. Leaders are made out of something what you have. And many of us have become leaders in different areas. Of course, there are some who what we call the naturally born leaders. They have some kind of element which you say that he is born with that. But as a matter of fact, during the process of your life, you shape something. And then you get to the kind of thing that you feel that is important. And therefore, this spreads over. What we talk of the excellence in science will spread over the same philosophy theory that you talk here. Will apply to any area that you talk, whether it's politics, whether it's general bureaucracy, or in area of education, or any area that you talk. As I said, you will find the same thing applied. And therefore, in the real life, we always feel there are limited resources, particularly time and money, and of course material. And we have unlimited, requirements, needs, and that is why we say, and wants, that is why we say that how do you prioritize, and then how you actually reconcile with the situation is the actual governance, actual excellence that you are talking in any field that you have. As I said, science, politics, philosophy, education, religion, or bureaucracy, and that is what I am going to really, and that is why I thought that it will be broader in a common interest. Let us talk this, what is happening in science, why we are low. At one time, we had been at a very high level, where we have gone now is a question. And that is what I am going to now speak to you about the excellence and science and its relevance to the scientific institution or academic institution, particularly central institutions that we have in the system that we have. And I will be really restricting to these areas, but first we'll give the introduction, what is excellence in science. Again, I will request you to just take off from your mind, because many things I know, we are all aware of it. But still, let us repeat it and see how we can generate this kind of thing and see how we can develop a better governance for the kind of society that we are looking for. Then the type of excellence, why excellence in science, and then requirements and attributes of an excellence which could lead to better governance, and then steps recommended for achieving excellence. Excellence in changing times, you are talking of 21st century today all the time. What is that? Did you ever achieve excellence in science? We will get back to what we were several thousand years ago, and where we are today. And then what do we do now in regard to the scientific excellence? And then where do we stand? And then what should be done to actually research of the excellence in science? These are the basic areas I will try to concentrate. Each one of them will definitely give you. Now, when we really talk of the excellence in science, we always stress upon that the knowledge and educated people are the resource for development. Societies depend on institutions which create knowledge and educated people. Knowledge is generated in higher education institutions. Achieving a special skill in a selected area is the prelude to the excellence. I think we all, and I will therefore be discussing particularly about excellence in science in institutions of higher learning. And therefore I would always like to just say and define in the very beginning as to what we really mean by it. We always say that excellence implies a higher degree of skill and vision in one's chosen pursuit. Excellence is judged by the performance which one has had achieved and not by the promise or potential that one may possess. This sentence is important, I think we have to keep in mind, and we therefore talk of two basic concepts of absolute excellence and the relative excellence. When you talk of absolute excellence, one sets before oneself an ideal which denotes in one's perception the best that can be theoretically achieved, done, and then one sets out to achieve the ideal. I mean, this is one thing which you are putting, and then you try to achieve the excellence. Since limits of accomplishment in area of human endeavor are not known, one's performance on the absolute scale is judged by not by achieving the ideal, but by determining whether or not a person has crossed a certain mark of an unending scale, as judged by the person who themselves have been high performer, or by others who have been a person to objectively evaluate the efforts and the consequences. When you talk of the relative excellence, it is a relative mode of assessment of excellence. One takes into account the consideration, the time, and the circumstances of assessment and the nature of person who is being assessed, which could be less than what we talked in the previous one. For example, I have written here what might have been considered an excellent experiment 200 years ago could be a trivial one today. Similarly, what would be an excellent bit of work by a child may not be considered to be the same caliber if done by an adult. Or, as I have said, our expectations from the prime ministers would not be the same as that from an average farmer or a factory worker. In that kind of, because you're sitting that kind of thing that you have. And then this is the combination of what we really look in terms of excellence when you talk of the capacity, the competence, and the commitment which are important for the excellence that you are trying to achieve. Now, then the next thing is assessment and appreciation of excellence. How does one assess excellence? And which I am always linking to the governance that you are talking, the ability to judge excellence in one's own without reference to the opinion of others is directly proportional to the excellence of the individual. Thus, the best way to judge excellence is by reference to peers who have arrived at their opinion independently. This would be as true of science as of painting, literature, or any other initiative or activity that we have. And then the next question comes, why excellence in science? Obviously, because science is a search for perfect truth, and you would not search for partial truth or half truth. That is what you talk in excellence in science. Poor quality science is no science. In fact, doing poor quality science is worse than not doing science, because it may be meaningless and purposeless. It may mean waste of precious human resource and material, and it may even give a wrong direction to research. Science is international, and hence it can have only one set of standards. And they are an international standard of excellence. In science, we cannot afford to have any standard other than the highest. If you are really trying to sue, you can't have one standard for India, the other standard for US, in any subject that you are talking. And the other reason that there is an exceptional something missing. The other is because there is an exceptional growth of new scientific knowledge. Somewhere back. Yeah, exceptional growth of there is exceptional growth of new scientific knowledge and the consequent exponential decay of poor quality scientific knowledge, which therefore produces no impact or whatsoever in the world of science. Also, because there is an intense international competition in world of science, and in this struggle only the fittest ideas survive, and we have to have a place of dignity in the world of science. We must produce science which can survive in this struggle, and this can only be an excellent science. Indian science has to be internationally competitive, and that is why we say, why do we want to continue this? Now then, because the standard of science will determine the standard of technology, and the standard of technology will determine the standard of life for the common people. The best quality of life and the best quality of science go together, and that is why we need excellence in science. While in quantitative terms we are contributing a significant percentage of world science, equally wise as measured by field medals, Nobel Prizes, great breakthroughs in science, our contributions are actually very insignificant, and we can improve this only through excellence in science if you think in that term. Now the next is requirement and attributes of the excellence in science. Now this is all of us, we again understand the pursuit of excellence requires courage, determination, knowledge of what has been done earlier, ability to introspection, this is self-criticism as we normally call, and then comprehension of the existing ability to overcome difficulties. For what is easy is never excellent, normally we try to attain the easier thing, and that is why excellence becomes very difficult. And patience and commitment to the objective. When all these are condensed in a creativity and availability of the physical resources for science, like the instrument and apparatus, then you head towards the excellence that you are looking in terms of science that you have. Now then the immediate question comes, what are the steps recommended for achieving excellence and governance in science? How does one cultivate an environment in which pursuit of excellence, say in science, should be possible? We give some of the conditions that we believe are to be satisfied to meet this. First is the right kind of person. We must cultivate a system which allows the employment of a right person for the job a person is capable of doing is well, but also knows his limitations. Now again, I said many of these things are very common. When we select a person, we increase the chances of the emergence of excellence. It would therefore be necessary to have a proper machinery of selection. Such a machinery must depend largely on people who themselves have achieved a high level of excellence and therefore in a position to assess. So the larger question comes how to change this. In this connection, it would recognize that not all people want to do a particular job, and that there is no job which someone could not want to do and do it well. It is therefore disastrous to have a hierarchy of jobs from the point of view of status, as this makes people prone to falsifying their image in order to get the more prestigious job, even though they might not be capable of doing it, might not be trained for it, or might not even want to do it. Therefore, if a country wishes to ensure that right people are available for a particular job, it is essential that all people in the country, this line is important, have the same initial opportunity as that this opportunity is substantial. If you deny a large segment of population such as opportunity which fails to draw on the gene pool that exists in the country, with the result that a large number of people who do not deserve to be in job are there in the job on account of the fact that they did not have the compete with everyone in the country who would have been their competitor and had educational opportunities which similar for all the citizens of India. Now, this applies in all the fields, whether education or sports or games or even politics. But you will find that this becomes the total gene pool that is available is not being exploited for bringing that kind of competition that we have. Once we have chosen an individual, we must provide him with the reasonable opportunity to express himself. In science, this would mean a minimum basic facilities, infrastructure, environment. It must be recognized that a certain minimum in this regard is essential and not a total luxury. If you have, out of 10 things, if you have 9, if you don't have one, you find the whole work suffers because you do not have been able to have the one thing that you have. And if one is committed to pursue excellence in science, result cannot be always guaranteed. And as such, one must be given enough time. In other words, once the right kind of people have been chosen, they must be trusted. This does not mean that there should not be assessed or held accountable. However, at least in the beginning, the assessment should be made on the basis of quality of their objectives, originality and soundness of the approach that he or she has thought of, and the total input that they have put in terms of time and efforts. This should be part of the thing that we have in the beginning. And then a person committed to excellence should have a high degree of inner motivation. However, external motivation becomes very important. This again very help pursuit of excellence demands that the objective that one sets for oneself are not easy to achieve. There is, however, always the human element which makes one, do the easier things. And that is why in most cases you find that we are really lacking excellence. Then the society must accept the importance of excellence. The excellence must elicit, even command, respect automatically. One of the major reasons for so-called brain drain from our country has been the lack of appreciation of excellence for the country that we have. It is only humane to expect reward for accomplishment. There must be, therefore, a system of recognition of excellence and of rewarding it. The standard laid down for a reward must not only be high, but must also be uniformly applied. It should be remembered that those who have achieved a high level of excellence do not normally like to project their own image. Today, scientific activity is dependent on a large number of other supporting activities. Some examples should be administration, stores, purchases, everything that I said in science, because it's linked to all that. And therefore, this also becomes very important that we really think of that. And we must therefore also remember that the nature, structure, and function of science and of scientific research organizations have changed substantially in 21st century. And in this century, especially as you have entered, in the century that you have, that means this century only. And in conclusion, therefore, we'll say for this part, a country which is not committed to excellence, which does not permit an environment in which excellence can survive and be propagated, and which makes a deliberate effort to pick out those who, when adjusted against severe but objective criteria, are likely to perform better than others, can never give today's condition the standards known, and it will be prone to exploitation by other countries. And that is where we said that we are now losing people who are now getting out of the places that we have. 6 steps for proceeding towards excellence. I will therefore suggest that creating a low-stress environment where one is working, which is safe for one where it is safe to make mistakes, yet expectation of success is high. Ensuring the subject is relevant, you want to learn when you see the point in it. And third, ensuring the learning is emotionally positive. It generally is when you work with the others, when there is humor and encouragement, regular breaks and enthusiastic support. And then consciously involving all the sense as well left brain and right brain thinking, and challenging your brain to think through and explore what is being learned with manual intelligence and are relevant in the order to make the personal sense of it. And finally, consolidating what is learned by reviewing in quiet period of relaxed alternate. How to promote excellence in science, and this is the topic that we are going to really refer, which is more important. A climate should be created in which quality of research is emphasized much more than the quantity of research. Suitable criteria for excellence should be explicitly agreed upon and published. We said that it should be very transparent at what is the criteria for judging excellence. Every research scholar, research scientist, lecturer, reader, professor, scientific departments, scientific societies, government organizations dealing with science should always keep this criteria in mind. The morale of every research worker and every research group should be high. Everyone should refuse to be satisfied with the mediocre results fit in for publication or mediocre journals only. The sky should be the limit for every research workers. All appointments and promotions must be made strictly on scientific merit, and everybody should feel that there will be perfect fairness and impartiality in the system. All recommendations based on nepotism, groupism, and favoritism should be regarded as the anti-science, anti-social, and anti-national. In fact, everybody making such recommendation may be regarded as a traitor because it does not harm to science and therefore does harm to science and also harm the nation. And this is one of the major flaws that this system will find, and you can very well judge the place where you are sitting here in the Indian Institute of Science and IIT Azam. The system has so well introduced that they find a very huge difference between what you find these systems and education system in other places and what we are talking today because of this one important element. Scientists in position in power have a positive role to play, as all of us understand. They have to discourage all acts of sycophancy on the part of their juniors. They have to be told bluntly that the only way to please the seniors is to excel in scientific work. Senior scientists have also a special responsibility. They have not only to get grants for their group, but they have to take examples of dedications to science for their colleagues. In spite of all of meeting, a senior scientist should spend 50 to 60 hours per week in his laboratory or work of place to set a model for those working under him. And all unethical practices in science, practical scientific investigation, publications and pages is not given proper credit and authors, real and ruthlessly eliminated. These should be 100% impartiality and fairness. And since there is no 99% in this kind of thing that is set up, we must work for mutual encouragement and accountability in science. Now, what is 21st century therefore stand for? Now, when you go for what we should do, the empires of the 21st century will be the empires of mind. As I said earlier, the knowledge will rule the world. The science and technology based knowledge will really rule the world, that is said. The world is changing at an ever accelerating pace. All of you know about it. Life, society and economics are becoming ever more complex. The nature of work is radically altering, and its age of uncertainty, and the past is less and less a guide to the future in the present world that we are talking. The challenges of 21st century are the challenges that need to be met by parents, educators, business and government. Success in 21st century will primarily depend on the extent to which we and our children develop the appropriate skill to master each of the interconnected forces of speed, complexity and uncertainty and achieve excellence. It is in our hand. The 21st century, if you just, to give you some example, today, if you just have a computer chip can perform electronic operations as fast as 4 billionth of a second, which was not known earlier, and maybe by 2020 it will become trillionth of a second. With a press of a button, in a matter of seconds, email is jabbed from computer to computer anywhere in the world. A single hair-thin optical fiber can transmit the contents of the Encyclopedia Britannica, all 29 volumes in less than a second. Now, this is the kind of, the satellite technology enables instant visual communication from Mongolia to Manhattan, from Laos to London, from Delhi to Dallas. At times, more than 1 billion people turn on their TVs to watch the same, sporting events. Today, the average Indian home can receive 39 television, 40 television channels, a figure that is doubled in a decade, and coming soon will be about 500 channels that will be running in your drawing room. Now, research project that used to take weeks can take minutes. From the comfort of your own home or office, through internet, you have quick and ready access to major libraries, universities, scientific journals, newspapers, magazines, and many other sources which you have never thought before, and maybe many other things which will come in near future. More than 200 million people in 160 countries are already on the net, with projection of 10 to the power 4 times more devotees by the year 2020. Every day, 3 million people travel from one part of the globe to another. Today, the world's airline carry 2 billion passengers a year, by the year 2000 it's going to be 10 billion. Now, these are the things that you think, when entering into the century that we are talking. Over the next 4 years alone, the number of newborns will exceed the entire population of planet Earth at the time of Christ. Each year, the world's population rises more than the combined citizen of France, UK and Germany. India itself adds to that of Australia every year, 1 year extra population of human being, equivalent to that of Australia. And all these new arrivals will need food, natural resources, and ultimately job. So this is what we have to now face and the kind of governance and action that we are looking for. Now in the changing world at present, scientific and technological breakthroughs seems to be reported on a daily basis. The World Data Bank are expanding at an unprecedented level. Knowledge measured by the output of research paper is doubling every 2 or 3 years. And perhaps we have to catch up with that. And our grandfather often held one job. Now this point which you go in the retrospect for their entire lives. Our parents probably had 2 or 3 jobs, changing, in that period that we have. Today the school dropouts face daunting prospect of 3 or 4 career changes during the course of their lifetime. Careers, not just jobs, mind you. It is no longer relevant today to ask a child or a boy, what do you want to do to be when you grow up? But the question now, should be, what do you want to do first? I mean, that's the kind of question which is being asked now in this particular relevant, and change has taken that kind of shape that we have. And in the 21st century, for achieving excellence, one will have to adopt accelerated learning methods. It consists of 6 steps grouped to learn effectively. In a sense, it recognizes that each of us has an individual preferred way of learning that suits us best. When you learn the technique and exactly match your personal learning style, you will be learning in the way that the most natural for you. Because it is natural, it is easier. Because it is easier, it is faster. And that is why one can achieve excellence quickly through accelerated learning. The most important education goal is learning to learn. Do we ever achieve excellence in science? This is the next step that we are going to talk. Now, let me just take you back to the history of Indian history. Now, in certain selected thing that I can pick up, take for instance medicine. Sushruta, the father of surgery, conducted complicated surgery like cesareans, artificial legs, fractures, urinary stone, and even plastic surgery and brain surgery 2,600 years ago. I mean, you can trace back where India was, where India is. Number system, scientific zero was invented by Aryabhatta. Place value system and decimal system were developed in India in the year 100 BC. Bhaskaracharya in the 5th century calculated the time taken by the earth to orbit the sun to be this, which is approximately same today, in the 5th century. You can see the genius and excellence that we had. The value of pi was first calculated by Bodhayana, and they explained the concept of what is known as the Pythagorean theorem. He discovered that this is the 6th century, long before the European mathematician could do it. Now in algebra, trigonometry and calculus came from India. Quadratic equations were propounded by Siddhartacharya in the 11th century. The largest number of Greek and Romans used was 10 to the power 6, whereas Indians used number by 10 to the power 53 with the specific names. Agriculture, 6,000 years ago, we invented and came into agriculture practices, which I think is the earliest record that can be traced in this. Now navigation, the art of navigation was born in river Sindhu 6,000 years ago. As a matter of fact, the very word navigation is derived from the Sanskrit word Navagati. Navagati. The word navy is also derived from Sanskrit word now, what you call the now, boat. Now, education, world's first university was established in Takshila in 700 BC, and every year more than 10,000 students from all over the world studied more than 60 subjects way back in 700 BC. And similarly, the irrigation and water supply, the earliest reservoir and dam for irrigation was built in Saurashtra, a beautiful lake, aptly called, Sudarsana, was constructed on the hills of Ravi Bhatka during Chandragupta Maurya's time. I mean, these are only few examples to tell you that we had been the leader in science and any area that you got, but unfortunately things have changed. And you will find this is the what people have said about it, the people who matter. The Albert Einstein himself said, "We owe a lot to the Indians who taught us how to count, without which no worthwhile scientific discovery could have been made." Now, this is such a gigantic statement you can imagine. Now, Mark Twain said, India is the cradle of all the human race, the birthplace of human speech, the mother of history, the grandfather of legend, and the great-grandmother of tradition. Our most valuable and most instructive material in the history of man are treasured up in India only. French scholar Romain Rolland said, if there is one place on the face of earth where all the dreams of living men have found a home, from the very earliest days when man began the dream of existence, it is India. It was not for nothing that Columbus set out on his expedition in search of sea route to the land of gold. And one may think, while science and technology might have flourished in India in ancient times, they have not been in the evidence during the last 1,000 years. But the facts are otherwise. I mean, it should not be taken in that way. Sir Thomas More, who was the governor of Madras, now people say that, I am repeating the last sentence I said, that they have thought that there had been evidence, one may think that while science and technology might have flourished in India in ancient times, they have not been evidenced during the last 1,000 years. But this is not so. Now you can see this statement now here. In 1813, that India qualified Europe in many things, equaled Europe in many things, manufacturing and agriculture skill, elementary school in every village, and the treatment of women. Pesce has written in his book, The Culture of Technology, 1976, in which he quotes, iron made in India at that time was the high quality. Samples of Indian iron were sent to Sheffield because it was excellently adapted for the purpose of fine cutlery. And it was difficult to obtain such good iron in England except imported from Sweden. In fact, in 1790, the British started importing iron to reduce the iron dependence on Sweden. In a decade or two, however, later, forced for both politics and technology, iron production in India started to decline and almost vanished in 1850s. It picked up again and was another few decades later, but this time using British technology. Now in rockery, the rocket were used by Tipu Sultan in his war on the British during 1780 to 1799. This rocket has a high thrust larger than anything in use at that time in Europe. The chief advantage lay in the material employed for the casing. Casing was material of cylinder made of hammered soft iron. Although it was crude, it represented the considerable advance over earlier technology in European rocket. At that time it had that effect it was. And vigorous research and development on rockets began in Britain when several Indian rocket cases were collected and returned to Britain for analysis. Further development was chiefly the work of Colonel late Sir William Congreve, who was told that the British had suffered more from the rockets than that from shell or the other weapons used by the Indians in those history. So therefore, it is quite clear that India, that is several Indians, have achieved excellence in several fields, ranging from medicine to mathematics and several other. What is the position now is more important. Now, I'll just go quickly because time may not permit to go into all the detail, but decline in Indian science and technology. This was a marked decline in technology now as we are talking every day, accompanied with the rise in British power about the textile industry. Indian researchers confirmed that colonization period was a turning point in global economic history. 1996, as pointed out, the major industrial power before 80 were briefly China and India. Now this is important. We can see that we were ahead or on par with the rest of the world in science and technology for 5,800 years out of 6,000 years of civilization, of world civilization. It was only during the last 200 years that we have fallen behind Western countries. In 1980s, India was ahead of China, Korea, and other Asian countries in scientific and engineering research, except Japan. Now, in 2000s, that is, it has gone down and is behind this country is a matter of real concern, which we are now going to talk about as to what is to be done. Where do you stand now in regard to scientific excellence? And what is the point in recent London Times that quotes Higher Education Supplement ranking of the world top 200 universities, which has included all many other countries that we have, and India stands on rank 41, and that too they mention Indian Institute of Technology. These countries are positioning themselves for leadership in the knowledge-based economy of the coming area, and that is where the concern is. They have to take many more of the institutions like that of Indian Institute of Technology. And one of the reasons that you can see is the India's number of papers that we have published, and the publication per year. When you are talking Indian science excellence in science, the quality and the quantity. Even the quantity has been growing at a very slow rate. When you compare some of the slides that you'll see for the next countries that will project the things. The other important criteria that you find in the impact of the scientific publication, that is in the referred journals internationally. This is a citation from Nature. You find the citation index, and that is the criteria rate per paper normally shown, that is the impact. Now you'll find that the country like Switzerland have 1.58, 1.7, and then you come down, India impact has only 0.48, which of course is a matter of greater concern today, which is being talked, both in terms of number of publications in scientific journals and research, and also the quality of paper that you have. And this obvious reason for that, you can see the slide very clearly tells that the percent of world science and technology expenditure is somewhere around less than 5%, 4% for India. And if you look to some of the countries like US and all, that's more than somewhere around 25, 26, 27% of the total, total world S&T expenditure they are alone using. And then India has only a part of it, and that is why the proportionate paper, the number of world publications that you find is same. This directly says the amount of expenditure, the amount of investment, the expenditure which the Prime Minister has now, of course, it has been being announced time and again, but only thing that you have to show is to see as to how we are able to make that. The other important point which normally we refer, the papers per research and development, the per unit research and development expenditure. If you look to these bigger bars, you can find that India is faring better. This clearly indicates that per rupee invested, perhaps the number of paper that is coming out from the Indian laboratory is higher compared to many countries, and is compared to that of US other countries even higher than that. But when it comes to paper per 1,000 research and development scientists, we are again far behind. Of course, it's coming less than 200 papers that we have for 1,000 persons. And where you take the case of UK and many other countries. So these are some of the parameters which you normally talk in science when you are going to really judge the excellence and quality that you are talking. And that is where we have to address the issues that we have. This again actually tells us the GDP, that is the $1,000 in terms of $1,000 per capita expenditure that you put, which again you look to the Indian condition, is the first making from the very beginning in the graph, which is apparently you can see it is very small, somewhere coming less than $10, less than $5 or $4, compared to what you see if you go to the Switzerland and many other developed countries, and proportionally the citation index. Now this obviously tells that the amount of expenditure or investment that you are making in science and education, even today has never gone beyond 1%. And that is a matter of concern which is being talked about today. And I think that's where we have to really address to the issues that we have. Now this table, if you took the three of these papers, these are only to establish where we stand and on how we are looking for excellence in science. Now if you look to the first column, so the full-time research scholars per million people. Now you can see it's only 157 for India compared to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, Switzerland, more than 3,000, 4,000 in US. That means there are about 4,000 people, scientists working for 1 million population compared to only 150 that we have in India. Look to the second column, papers per million, again is just 11.34 for us, whereas this is very high, comes to more than 1,000, papers per million population that you have. And the last column indicates the time that it takes for an Indian average scientist to publish something in a cited journals, scientifically impacted journals, is about 13 years compared to what we have 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years for the developed country. All this reflects only on the investment that we are making and the scientific contribution that we are making. If you put the number, quality, impact, the number of years that you have taken, the number of scientists who are working for the population that you have, all put together, you find that this is where we really need to actually accelerate in the area that we can really think of, so that we are able to push it up that we read. And this is what is being talked by every one of us, those who are actually talking in science. But how to do that is a larger question, and this is what is being debated. And you must have now noted the statement made by Dr. Chidambaram, Dr. Shyana Rao, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, and many others, those who have been talking. And in area of agriculture, even we have made very straightforward statement as to what we are doing with less than 1% investment. What are we thinking to achieve? Then the question comes.
Can I just request you to go back one slide? Yeah, I have a question here.
Yeah.
I didn't want to come back to it at the end because we have to search for this slide.
Yeah, please.
We are saying that there are 157 full-time people working per million. Yes, the involvement definitely is very less from our country research groups. Fine. The next one is, it's 11 papers are being produced per million.
Yeah.
And the fact that it takes 13 hours to produce one paper. Can you just compare this with some figures up the column?
Which
Just interpret it smartly for us, please.
No, this is the third one is actually the number of years that it takes to publish a paper in a cited journal.
Correct. Why should it take our Indian scientists 13 years when it is taking only 1 year? Can you just comment?
No, why I'm saying, because the number is not really proportional to what you are going to actually get in very well impacted journals. Am I clear in saying that? Now, if you are going to talk to the number of papers that you have published is one that you have got, as I said in the beginning, that curve is going up. But when you look to the paper which has really been published in some scientific journals with a lot of relevance and impact, there where we are taking this main number to really show the quality. And this, as a matter of fact, is directly relating to the excellence in science.
Okay,
that is why in the beginning I said that when you really relate this publication or quality, has to, you have to wait for some time to pick up. And I think that period in our case is much longer. Reasons are very obvious, because the scientists take larger time to get the facility, collect the material, get the resources. Whereas in places where you talk the Europe and the other developed countries, you just start, because you land at a platform and things are set. And you just start from the next day, start making, what you want to make. So that's the difference that we are discussing this point as to why this happens.
Sorry.
Just one connected point. There was a bar chart which you displayed just a couple of slides ago. I'll give you the context. Where it said,
This one?
Yeah, this is the one. So the papers produced per rupee expenditure, interestingly looks, same for India, Japan and US, while the investment in the overall quantum towards S&T in US is rather, there was that 1.5 as the number of papers being churned out, 1.5%, where India was only 0.48.
Yeah. That was impact.
Yeah, impact.
That's not the number.
Yeah,
this one. Yeah, this one. This is not the number.
Okay, this is impact.
This is impact factor.
No, so for producing a paper, the same cost, rupee cost, is being incurred in India, Japan and US.
No. This is explained. This is what I was trying to say. Now, if you take to the number of papers which are produced, okay, and the amount that you have invested in research laboratory, if you compare that, even we say in agriculture particularly, the amount of investment that you have made in agriculture, R&D, if you look to the development that we have made in agriculture field, it can excel any part of the world. Any part of the world. It is, even today it is 0.7, 0.6% of the total GDP, whereas countries have 5%, 6% of the GDP. And what we have done from 50 million to 215 million is something world record. So same thing, when you talk in terms of paper, the number that you have gone and the amount of investment that you are making, if you look to that scale. But this may not necessarily correlate to what we said in the first, 0.48. Or even when you come to this number of years that you have taken to bring one thing, which can be quoted in Nature, which can be quoted, in some of these very outstanding journals. That you take larger time to get that, because number may not directly be on that part.
does it mean that our papers don't get published in leading journals?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. This is precisely what I am saying. This is precisely what I am saying. The number is not really entering into that kind of excellence. And if you have to enter into excellence, perhaps you have to invest, because to get excellence, you may not count all those papers that way, but you can always, people have been publishing because of the number. Even the number of scientists that you have in the country and the number per scientist, even that will be higher. But then it may not enter into the impact or the kind of, number of years that are taking to get that. That's what it actually conveys.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Now, then what should be done is rather more important. Now, creating and strengthening of the universities of quality education research, role of teachers, senior scientists, role of state government, enhancing resources, removal, loosening of grips and bureaucracy, of course, they are very general. Resource output, there can be no two opinion that in the decade just after independence, we invested heavily in higher education. This led to the achievement of excellence by individuals and investors. We are now reaping the fruits of it. Let us see the examples again. According to, of course, family income, if you look to this, now this is one indicator. If you look to the, we invested 64% in urban India on expenditure on food, which is now 42%. I will more the expenditure on food, that means lesser developed we are in terms that we said. And therefore it's now 42% and 73% for rural India is now 50%. And nationwide sample survey, this is it. And this is the percentage of total utilized for consumption. This is one good science that shows there is a development. And number of poor people who have gone down from 50% way back in 30 years back are now 22%. So there has to be increased input in higher education if you want to achieve excellence again, to make a mark in internal scientific scene, and at the same time prosperity and security of our children. Now, this curve is what I was talking, this is what is indicating. If you look to the R&D expenditure, the bar that you have, and the percentage of GNP, at one time it touched, the line, and it has again gone down back from 2001, and this is which is very alarming today. Now, while you are trying to compete, look to the country like China, look to the country, where you see the kind of expenditure they are now making. This has really taken as a matter of concern which is being talked. A lot of statements which have been made by the Prime Minister, you must have heard of it. India has actually announced that they will spend 2% of the GNP in most welcome and crucial juncture. And Professor Shyama Rao, as he said, that the science is on the deathbed. You must have read in the newspaper. Let us hope that PM's announcement starting, but as I said, this has to be brought in practice. And I think there are some positive signs, particularly education into science laboratories, and even partly some location that he finds in R&D and agriculture. But then to achieve 2% from less than 1% is a very gigantic job. And this is what is being talked about to relate to the system that we have. India has survived with an increasingly mediocre high education system for decades. Now, as India strives to compete in globalized economy in areas that requires highly trained professionals, the quality of higher education becomes increasingly important. So far, India's large educated population, based on its reservoir of least moderately well-trained university graduates, have permitted the country to move ahead. Now, this may not really, because when you are trying to excel, you have to really have some very kind of trained people that you have in the system that you are talking. This is again one that shows the countries and the number S&T manpower per selected countries. You can look where you stand, less than 100, less than 10 S&T manpower for selected countries. That is S&T manpower per 1,000 population. Is of course the same thing that you said, but that was and the number. And you can see, countries like Canada, there are more than 100 people these are working. Now these are all indicators where we have to address the issues. But the competition is so fierce that we have, China in particular is heavily investing in improving its best universities with aim to making a small group of them world class. This is one way that they are doing, if you take the MIT and even in the Asian countries, there are some selected institutions which of course country has also started thinking of funding some selected institution in a bigger way to bring the quality in the system. But in country like ours, I think we have to move and take this standard up for larger situation that you have. Several of the well-endowed and effectively managed private institutions maintain reasonably high standard although it is not clear that these institutions will be able to sustain themselves in the longer run. They can help produce well-qualified graduates in such fields as management, but they cannot form the basis for comprehensive research universities. This sector lacks the resource to build the facilities required for quality institution and research in the science. Nor can enough money be earned by providing instructions in the maintenance of arts and science discipline. Most of the private institutions do not focus on advanced training in the science and social science and other subjects. And I mean, most of you are aware of this. The reservation policy is going to put another load that we have, and we are all struggling, particularly universities like us, as to how to compete with this 27% load that you are going to have, and comparative infrastructure development that you are thinking in that sense to have. And therefore, to compete successfully in the knowledge-based economy of 21st century, India needs enough universities that not only produce bright graduates for export, but can also support sophisticated research in number of scientific and scholarly fields and produce at least some of the knowledge and technology needed for an expanding economy. How can India build a higher education system that will permit it to join the developed economies? The only emerging private sector in higher education cannot spearhead academic growth. Only public universities have the political potential to truly world-class institutions and programs of national prominence have already been identified by the government, but these institutions have not been adequately or consistently supported. The top institutions require sustained funding for public resources. Academic salaries must be high enough to attract excellence in science. You all know there is a very high level of brain drain today. In fact, career in science is being talked by everybody, but everybody is moving to management, to multinationals, to other fields for obvious reasons. And therefore, the fellowship and other grants should be available for higher, bright students. An academic culture that is based on merit-based norms and competition for advancement in research fund is a necessary component, and it is a judicious mix of autonomy to the creative research and accountability to ensure productivity. World-class universities require world-class professors and students, and culture to sustain this, to stimulate them. This is R&D expenditure of GDP, and then the R&D expenditure percentage of GDP and selected countries. Well, we have talked about this earlier also in a different form. This is saying the same thing. Then what is required? A clearly differentiated academic system has not been created in India, a system where there is some clearly identified institution that receive significantly greater resource than other universities. One of the main reasons that the University of California and Berkeley is so good is that other California universities receive much less support. India's best universities require sustained state support. They require the recognition that they are indeed top institutions and deserve commensurate support. But they also require effective management and an ethos of an academic meritocracy. At present, the structure are not in place to permit building and sustaining top quality program even if resources are provided in the system that you have. Then what needs to be done? That is a combination of specific conditions that resources are needed to create outstanding universities, sustained enhanced financial support from the government with an appropriate mix, accountability and autonomy, the development of a clearly differentiated academic system, including private institutions in which academic institutions have different mission, resource and purpose, managerial reforms and the introduction of effective administration, and truly merit-based hiring and promotion policies for the selected professors, professions, and similarly rigorous and honest recruitment, selection, and instruction of students. Institute of IT sector. Now this is the kind of curve that which indicates is again one sector is a matter of greater concern. Why one should go? Because given condition that you have, they are all moving to that. They prefer to go to management, prefer to do the MBA, go to some kind of computer and some other thing rather going to physics, mathematics, geology, biology, things like that. And this is where is again a matter of concern. If you want to attract, bring excellence in science, you can't bring by, as we said in the very beginning, mediocres can't produce excellence in science. But if you have to attract them, you have to have some kind of trend reverse where you can have this kind of attraction, the science that we have. India cannot build internationally recognized research-oriented university overnight, but the country has to have the key element in place to begin and sustain the process. India will need to create a dozen or more universities that can compete internationally to fully participate in the world economy. Without these universities, India is destined to remain a scientific backwater. Now, this is important. That is why it is being set to set up few more IIMs, few more IITs, few more Indian Institute of Science, and some more central where you can have larger facility and actually really cultivate the excellence in science. But again, important, look to the previous graph that I showed, it becomes important because even those institutions, people are leaving and going away for obvious reasons. And therefore, to compete successfully in the knowledge-based economy in 21st century, India needs enough universities that can support sophisticated research, is said by, people that we have. The role of a teacher should have the ability to build up the students under the charge. He must be, of course, this again said in the Rig Veda, you can just see it. An ideal university where excellence may get achieved. A house of ideas and scholarship. Ideas outweigh hierarchy. Refutation by scientific method, not by authority. Skepticism and criticism examines crucial. Researchers have freedom to work on problems of their interest. Academic decisions by community of scholars. Faculty reputation based on quality of research, not position in hierarchy. Research evaluation through peer review are some of the requirements which you should have in the university system. Then, of course, I will just run one or two slides, which I hope these will be given away to them, because some of these are there where we have given some models, which you can see how you can categorize the rich criteria for excellence in higher education. Some of these have been fed at the leadership category and strategic planning, leadership, government and social responsibility, strategic development. All these mark is how you can really assess the excellence in science and leadership in science that can be brought. These have been, there are 2-3 models which I don't want to go into detail, but there have been many other models which have been successfully implemented in evaluating the excellence in science and governance, as a matter of fact. But I think these are only details which have been done and proven, and these are very well applicable system that we do. But this can be used while we think of evaluating the system. And then ISO 9001 assists to excellence in higher education, managerial responsibility, then resources management responsibility, management, and the product realization, where we have all these steps that we take, planning and product realization, educational customer-related process, design and development, purchasing, and then production and service operation, control, monitoring and measuring, then measurement, analysis of improvement. These are various steps that have been mentioned in the system that we go for evaluating governance and excellence in science. And as I said, for that purpose, you can go over the other subject that we have in the system to say the same thing. And what Jawaharlal Nehru said way back in 1957, if this university stands for humanism, tolerance, reasons, prayers, very ideas and search for truth, stand for the onward march to human race towards even higher objectives. If the universities discharge their duties adequately, then it is well within the nation, well with the nation and the people. And excellence, finally, in just at the Andhra University on the occasion of 60th birthday of its Vice Chancellor, C.R. Reddy, Sir C.V. Raman said, the need of the hour is to reconcile and blend the modern spirit with the ancient ideas of country in the tradition of Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, Pandit Malviya, and Sir Palli Radhakrishnan, that they said. And then there, of course, I have made some reference there that you can see in the further reading, which you can think in the system that we have. And finally, I will just conclude by saying that creating, these aspects, if you look, as I was talking in the first few slides, I said there are few very, very important aspects that we talked about. Was the resource that we have, how to prioritize that, how to reconcile. If you are able to excel and govern on that, I think that is where you can find the kind of excellence that we are thinking in the science that we have. Now, the examples, of course, I don't have to go, you all know. Look to the countries like Singapore, look to countries like China, which was, it has, the per capita expenditure. Few years ago we were just equal. Today they are 2.5 times ahead of us. Singapore, a country of just island, and you can imagine the kind of, very small island, the kind of governance and system that they have made. Now, given this, I just want to conclude by saying that India has tremendous potentiality in terms of human resource, in terms of livestock resource, in terms of land resource. We own, 2% of the land resource, 15% of the population, and then water, solar, any biodiversity, and rain. Just take the example of water, which is one of the most crucial resource and governance, as I said, Excellence. We have, this much water raining about 1130 or 1200 millimeter rain on 329 million hectare land. And we go in the Guinness Book of World Record. Cherrapunji, is the place which is in the Guinness Book of Records for highest rainfall and the most worst hit area even for drinking water. Now, we have floods in Rajasthan, which receives only 50 millimeter rainfall, or 100 millimeter rainfall, or 150 millimeter rainfall. And you have droughts, severe droughts in northeastern region, including Cherrapunji, where you have more than 20,000 millimeter rainfall, and we go in the Guinness Book. Now the question is that, and all that is leading to severe erosion, loss of biodiversity, soil. And today Ganges, let's say Ganges and Brahmaputra, which used to be a site, all of you remember that the entire transport system from Delhi to Calcutta used to be by ship, only by water system transport. All the sea, river, and used to be transporting every food material. Today you can't take even a small boat. The kind of disaster that we have created is just unbelievable. And we sometimes say that we are sitting on the balcony, and now it's time to reverse. What is the kind of leadership that you bring, and how can you produce? We have the kind of soil which is again richest in the world. If you go to alluvial belt of India, you will find that is one of the richest that you can't find anywhere in the world. The kind of sunshine, America takes 9 months to harvest wheat. We harvest wheat in 4 months. We can have 4 crops in a year. They can't think of more than 1 crop or 2 crops. And same situation, I can keep on narrating these things, but again point comes, what is the governance system that you have, how we manage it. Today people are saying that food production should go up. UP, Bihar and systems like this should contribute. But when it comes to input, comes to electricity, comes to water, you find that you are struggling for getting electricity even for 2 or 3 hours in 24 hours. This is a time when it's most crucial, you don't have rains, no water, no inputs. How can you boost it? And same thing goes for schools, goes for the university system, goes for the funding resource. And therefore, as I said in the very beginning, there is nothing that I am telling you new. But since you are all executives, you have to hammer these issues, because unless you put all this in one place, unless you bring this thing, we will always keep saying this. After all, there are examples around the world. I mean, around us, as I said, take the South Korea, take Japan, take China. They are just going ahead of us in several times that you can think of, just because they have been able to put the governance in place. They have now decided to train their 1,000 biotechnologists in US, are sending some of them in IT, for IT training in India, they are thinking of doing that. Now that means a bulk, you capture the knowledge, use it, and while using you have some kind of, governance in the system that you have to give the accountability for what you are hired for. Now if this is calculated, as we keep saying, and I think we have, as I said, we have proved in many areas, we are next to none as far as our potentiality is concerned. Unfortunately, we have not been able to gear up, we have not been able to put the stroke and knit the whole thing to put the system in one place. And this is where the role of all executives sitting here can share these ideas and try to see how we can translate this. You can't bring things overnight, but there should be a sign for change. And that change only can come, because in this global competition, only can come if you can excel in the area. I mean, as I have added the system in agriculture in the country. If you don't really compete agriculture, it will be wiped out. everything will be flooded from your neighboring countries at a much cheaper rate than your farmers can produce. Where will they go? I mean, therefore, it's a very large question that we have to now address, and things are being diverted to the issues that, because earlier we had a stand that you won't let things come in, you can import it, but now with the global market, you have no option but to accept it and reject your own produce and let the farmers, survive or die, whatever it is. And therefore, I think that then dictates the other systems, whether it's education or system, whatever they do. So I think, gentlemen, thank you very much, and I will only leave a message with you that pick up some of these things and try to inculcate in the system where we're working as to how we can bring 2 plus 2, making it 8 or 16 rather than making it 2 plus 2 just 4. And that is where the system has to excel. And I repeat that we have potential, we have opportunities, we have climate set for us. All that we have to put the element of courage, commitment, honesty, integrity. And this is where I think it's a question which everybody is saying. But all of us, that kind of potential. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sangeeta, for listening to me for that long. And I will be most happy to interact with you. As I said earlier, that it's not that I have come to lecture you. I have come to gain something from you, because just a kind of discuss. I presented certain things which we know, and which is there in many things that you must have said several times. But then we think and discuss. The larger question comes how to do all this. And that is where the governance comes, and that is where we have to excel. So I stop here and open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Singh. We can take questions for about 10 minutes. Yes. Yeah, sure. Please.
Sir, you had talked about the scientific pursuits in universities with very little funding. I feel that most of the research institutes in the country, they are having a lot of funds, but they don't have the researchers. Whereas the universities don't have funds, they have students, they have researchers. Why can't we shift the roles? Why can't government give more money to the universities where the students are there, research scholars are there, so that the base is strong?
Well, I think I will say you give why one versus that. You give both the system enough money. That's the logical answer. These institutions are not really given very high funding. It's only you can find few institutes. Example could be one where you are sitting, Indian Institute of Science, But you go to many other institutions which are running, you will find they are just hand to mouth. They are not able to really build the infrastructure that you have. So that is why I was saying it is just not possible for any system. I gave example of California University, Berkeley. Among universities that you have in California, they have funded very heavily to Berkeley than compared to other university. I was in Davis campus, we compared that system. You'll find, because there, if you want to really breed excellence in science, it has to come from few institutions. But number that you have like Indian Institute of Science is too small a number for the country like this, where you can really think of that. At the same time, you should have a larger contribution for the system that you have in the state agriculture university, state university systems, education system, colleges. But there we are not able to give. That is why, if you really put 2 to 3% of your total GDP, as many countries are doing, why can't you do that? That is the pressure that has to be built. Several times it has been discussed. I had been Secretary Government of India in Department of Agriculture Research, fought several times in first the parliamentary committees. They had taken, they said at the platform that we will all resign. When I said that you have said this at least n number of times, who has listened to you? And this is time what the Prime Minister now announced. Let us see and watch what it comes. If it comes to even 2%, it will be a really good amount. Education demands 6%. So, they are poorly nourished, and therefore the quality of education is that. So, while the one party, that is no question of diverting, they should also be given sufficient funding. State funding is almost, many states that you can count is almost nil. It's just paying not even 100% of their total salaries and things that you have. So question of research and quality education has not been thought of so far. Now this is the kind of debate that is going on, and that is why they thought of creating, multiplying some of these institutions. And in the last meeting, the Prime Minister selected that about 6 to 8 universities should be selected every year for 100, 150 crore, so that they can at least come up and build some kind of excellence in science.
Mr. Murari.
Yeah, do we have a S&T policy at all? Maybe there was one, but somewhere it has lost direction or something like that?
No, there is a science and technology policy document. But, document is one thing, which is very well said, and this is what comes from the, if you take the expenditure in and the amount of money that should be spent on funding that should be given, you will even find in the policy document same statements. If you look to the education policy document, said about 6% of the total GDP should be spent on this. But it's never crossing 1.5%.
Why would that be the case, especially when there are statistics like this, which I'm sure the educationists and academicians and the scientists would be projecting in different forums at the highest, points of interaction. You showed us that graph, the R&D expenditure was going up till about some late 90s, and then the percentage of GDP was committed to R&D was coming down.
So this is what is the matter of concern. That is why I shared with all of you. I said, and this has been said several times, but at the latest statement of Prime Minister, you have said that he said that we'll take the S&T expenditure to minimum to 2%. 2% could be a big jump in the 11th plan if that is going to be done. And even in the 10th plan, I think we saw the sign of it. Things have gone up. But again, it is not the level that you can think of. You could be comfortable. So all of you, sitting here, including me, wherever you have, we are making, as I said, I headed the department of Indian Council of Agriculture Research, made this kind of vast numbers, right? Time and again it is being made. Several times these statements are being made in the House, both the houses by the Minister for Agriculture. But things have just not picked up. Now what is to be done, that is the question of greater concern.
I have another point. I'd like you to respond. We all say, Jawaharlal Nehru in 1957, started this IITs and, laid the foundation for IIMs and things like that. That great man passed away in mid-60s, and after that we have run for 40 years, still thinking that the IITs were set up for a purpose and that they would be doing something. The world around us has changed, and the purpose for which IITs were created is probably not what they are doing right now. And the students or the people who get trained with those resources that have been, even now today with this reduction of R&D percentage expenditure, those premier institutes do get their fair share, I would think. So can we not do some adjustments to, make sure that those people who were put through those institutes for a purpose for this country in the area of science and technology can do something by quotas, reservations, some compulsory things like that?
It's a very larger question because, IITs have done its job. If you go to United States, many of you must be knowing it, they will say that it is easier to get admission in any institute of technology in US. It's difficult to get in IIT in India. And academic excellence that IITs have established or IIM have established is no way less than anyone anywhere in the world. They have proved beyond doubt. Now, question of retaining them, because the other question which has been said, we are producing for someone else, we are not producing, 80% run away. Now, this is one thing, you can't really put that kind of check. That is why I showed you the graph. Now, many IITians, many of these who are young graduates coming from this would like to stick to that graph which goes, and you earn millions in 1 or 2, 3, 4 years. Several lakhs that you get the salary, they are going back, they are trying to stay back in Bangalore rather than going to California. But that is even today so small. Otherwise you can't check them. You can't tell them we'll give you 30,000 and be with us. and forget about your 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs that you are getting elsewhere. So this again comes to the same point that you have to create that kind of both way, not only breeding the right kind of human resource, but also retaining the kind of human resource that you have, which is very, very important today, because otherwise this is what we call the brain drain within and outside. Within, when I say, lot many institutions. See, as I said, we are now heading an institution, the largest university system in South Asia, in Asia. You really find difficult to get good people in the university today. In management, in medical, in technology, in many other, because they just go away to some kind of private system where they are getting a lot of money. Even private colleges.
So I think let's have the final question from Dr. Dekne.
Sir, you have mentioned in one of your slides, as well as many other speakers had been talking about that availability of good teachers, excellent teachers at the university levels itself is less. Even in IITs, it is said that 30% shortage of teachers is there. And if you look at the private colleges, the quality of teachers, if you take, it will be much less. And then that is going to feed to the excellence, in fact, what we want to develop as an excellence in knowledge or science and all those things. So it's a vicious circle where we don't have good teachers, we don't produce good students, and then we are not paying the teachers also well, and then best students, they don't go to the teaching profession. So what should be the solution for such a problem?
These are same questions. This is a matter of real concern today. You are very short of quantity and also the quality of teachers. I mean, if you go to the social science, if you want to recruit a lecturer or teacher in Hindi, you can get many. If you want to really recruit one in nuclear science, 3 times we advertised, we didn't get one. They just don't come because they have a lot of demand elsewhere. And the production is there. So the point that is, and then the very recruitment, for years you'll find in college and university there have been no recruitments, and they are running, most universities running at the 50% staff. And the result is that overburdened, then the quality of teachers going down, and that is why the education and that kind of interest. So this is, as you yourself say, it's a vicious circle. But only answer to this comes, if you take the whole problem in totality, the right from the day you are starting, training a teacher or student, and then you hire the way you hire him, and then how you retain him by paying the salary and kind of, charming things that other systems are giving. If you are able to, I think then only, because once you lose science, then the whole science and technology goes up. You may not really be able to think of what you are talking today. And that is why countries, like China, they are spending very heavily today. They don't mind, I remember they sent last year about 1,000 biotechnologists to US, Japan, other countries, 1,000 people to train them and brought them back on the same terms and conditions what you can get in US. Remember that part. If you are going to train somebody, bring him here. If you train him there, if he gets, $10,000, he will certainly not come here on 20,000 rupees. So that may not happen in all the cases, but wherever you are involved, and this is what is being in fact talked about, if you are going to train 200 people like that, retain those 200 at that level, so that at least you can breed, but this can happen only in selected system that you have. But at least you maintain those talents so that they can rebreed the same kind of human breed which you are looking for as a talent in science. So I think there had been a lot of meetings. You must have seen the document which has come from Dr. Chidambaram's office, the career in science, a lot of presentations has gone to Planning Commission. Now from 10 plus 2 you are picking up and taking him all the way and making him, to be placed in university system. Few universities are being identified to train them and absorb them on the terms which is being said, so that he feels, because many are there. I can also tell you this fact, many bright chaps, they are not really interested to get on to the multinationals. They are going up, and maybe we see the lighter part of it now, and a brighter part. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Singh, for sharing those experiences, not only as a practicing scientist, but also as one who has headed many science institutions. May I request Shri V. Satyanarayana for a formal vote of thanks.
Good evening, distinguished speaker and scholar, Professor Punjab Singh and course coordinator, Dr. Sangeeta, and co-participants. We had a very interesting lecture from Professor Punjab Singh presenting the ancient glory of Indian science and present status of the Indian science. Here, there is a lot of contrast. We are living in the past, but we are not doing what are the steps required to improve the quality of the science that is coming out from India. This is one thing. And one more thing is there in his discussion, he has told that merit-based promotions and other things. In this, I want to tell, one thing is there when I have studied, what is meant by merit? In my education, when I am studying 6th class, my teacher told, what is merit? We are told that merit means knowledge and intelligence, all these things. He told that merit means, I will give you what my teacher has told, because till today I remember that one. M means money, E means education, R means recommendation, I means influence, T means time. When all these things there, then only it is a merit. So when my teacher told that one in my 6th class, I thought that it is not true. But nowadays, if you want to produce a good quality scientist or anything, money is required and good environment is required. That we have to do. And Professor Ji has brought out that point very decently in his speech. And for his interesting talk, let us, from a participant side, I want to have a clap and thank you very much.
I also offer this NIAS memento in appreciation of your presence and patience. Thank you, Professor.